The Canterbury Pilgrims, an excerpt from Pictures from English Literature by Sara Hamlin, published 1892. Note: The Canterbury Tales was written by Geoffrey Chaucer. Miss Hamlin calls him Dan Chaucer because Dan was an old word for master or sir between 1387 and 1400. Framed as a storytelling contest between pilgrims on a journey to Canterbury, the Canterbury Tales includes 24 highly entertaining stories which range from hilarious to heartrending. It is one of the most important works of English literature. The Canterbury Pilgrims. The picture I want next to show you is by that rare old artist, Dan Chaucer, who painted in such rich and glowing colors that his creations are as fresh and attractive today as when they were first called forth by his magic pen. It represents a merry company that set out on a journey one bright morning in April many years ago. They called the journey a pilgrimage because they were on their way to worship at the shrine of Thomas à Becket in Canterbury. You know what was meant by a pilgrimage, how the pilgrim with staff and scrip went many weary miles on foot that he might atone for his sins by praying at the tomb of some well-known saint. The most sacred pilgrimages were made to the tomb of our Savior in the holy city of Jerusalem, but there were other shrines near home, and the tomb of a Becket had long been a favorite place of worship. These, however, were not always solemn and fatiguing journeys. Oftentimes, people who were going to the same shrine would form a little company, and thinking that the evil one was thwarted by the object of their journey, they would give themselves up on the way to mirth and jollity. Well, these Canterbury Pilgrims were just such a joyous company when they set forth from the Tabard Inn one sunny morning long ago. Can you see in the picture the beautiful blue sky, the green hedge, and the white May blossoms? It is no wonder that, at this delightful season of the year, people did long to go on pilgrimages and palmers for to seek strange lands. Would you like to know who some of these merry pilgrims are? That big man with the jolly face, who seems to be the leader of the party, is Harry Bailey, the host of the Tabard Inn. When he learned that they were all going in the same direction, he offered to conduct them, as he was familiar with the road, and in order to make the time pass pleasantly, he proposed that everyone should tell 2 stories on the way to Canterbury and 2 more on the way home. He added, shrewd old fellow that he was, that they all must return to the Tabard Inn, and he who had told the best story should sup at the expense of the rest. This jolly Harry Bailey was very entertaining, and his witty remarks added much to the general fun. That noble-looking man riding along, dressed in a complete suit of armor, is the knight of the company. A knight there was, and that a worthy man, who, from the time in which he first began to ride afield, loved well all chivalry, honor, and frankness, truth, and courtesy. Most worthy was he in his master's war, and thereto had he ridden, none more far, as well in Christian as in heathen lands, and borne with honor many high commands. But although he was such a great soldier, he was in his manner as gentle as a woman. He was a very perfect, noble knight. Close beside him is his son, a gay young squire, whose handsome face and rich dress give brightness to the whole picture. I think Chaucer must have smiled when he described this young fellow. His locks all curled as though laid in a press, embroidered was he as a meadow bright, as all full of freshest flowers, red and white. Singing he was, or flute playing all day. He was as fresh as is the month of May. Do you see that pretty little lady riding there? That is the nun, Madame Eglantine. Chaucer liked her, I know, even though he did make fun of her in a quiet way. There was also a nun, a prioress, who of her smiling was most simply and coy. Her greatest oath was only, "By Saint Loy!" and she was called Madame Eglantine. Full well she sang the services divine, intuned through her nose melodiously. At meal times she was very apt withal. No morsel from her lips did she let fall, nor in her sauce did wet her fingers deep. She was so charitable and piteous that she would weep did she but see a mouse caught in a trap, if it were dead or bled. And little dogs she had, which oft she fed with roasted meat and milk and finest bread. But sore she wept if one of them were dead, or happily with a rod were smitten smart, and all was conscious and tender heart. She must have been an affected little body, and yet I like to look at her. She is so dainty and sweet. That thoughtful-looking man, with his eyes bent upon the ground, is the Clerk of Oxford, a poor man, for we are told, his horse, it was as skinny as a rake, and he was not too fat, I'll undertake, but had a sober, rather hollow look, and very threadbare was his outer cloak. All the money he could get he spent on books, for rather would he have had at his bed's head a score of books all bound in black or red of Aristotle and his philosophy, than rich attire, fiddle, or psaltery. He talked but little, yet what he did say was sensible and wise. You must take a good long look at this figure of the Clerk of Oxford, for it is said to be a representation of Dan Chaucer himself. Just behind him is the richly dressed monk upon his splendid horse, and quite near rides the friar, to whom Chaucer gives a sly hit when he says, "In giving penance, very kind was he, when people made it worth his while to be." The man you see with his beard, as white as the daisies be, is the Franklin, a great landowner. Well-to-do was he, and very hospitable. In his house it seemed as though it snowed with meat and drink. You must not pass by that middle-aged woman who wears such a broad hat, for she is of great importance in her own estimation, and would never forgive you if you did not give her more than a passing glance. Bold is her face, and fair and red of hue. She is called the wife of Bath, and is very expert in weaving cloth. She has made a great many pilgrimages to Rome and other places, for she has plenty of money, as one can see by her showy dress. Not far from her is the parson, poor in purse, but rich in holy thought and work. Christ and the 12 apostles' laws he taught, but first himself obeyed it as he ought. These are some of the people you can see in the picture. It would take too long to describe all the members of that large and pleasant company, but you can see that they represent all classes of society. If you look closely, you will see the sergeant of law, a very busy man. Nowhere there was a busier man than he, yet busier than he seemed to be. There, too, are the carpenter, the doctor, the merchant, in fact, someone from every department of life. This is the reason why the picture is such a favorite. It portrays so well the men and women of the 14th century that it seems as if they lived and moved before us. But our wonderful artist does more. He makes them talk and tell us just such stories as they would have told in that faraway time. Don't you wish you could have been with them and have heard their delightful tales as they wandered through the lovely English country? There are 3 I should dearly like to have heard. The nun's priest's bright tale of Chanticleer and the charming partlet, the pardoner's clever fable of Death and the 3 revellers, and the bold merry wife of Bath's story of the old woman and the knight. What a pity that we do not know of the arrival at Canterbury, the ceremonies at the cathedral, and the homeward journey. But the pen dropped from the artist's weary fingers before he depicted those scenes for us, and we can only guess who it was that supped at Harry Bailey's inn at no cost to himself.